Hey everybody, what's going on? So today we're talking about the chapter in How to Read Literature Like a Professor that's entitled, Where Did I See Her Before? The general idea is that all stories are the same, and when we're reading literature, we want to be very aware and cognizant of the fact that there are certain patterns, not just in storytelling, but in plot, in character design, in all of these things. And we want to train ourselves to be aware of when we start recognizing different pieces coming up within the stories or the poetry that we're reading, so that we can recognize and understand the influences that might exist there. So let's get started. So this is all basically pattern recognition. Now, it's hard at the to begin with, but like anything else, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. If you just pick up an instrument and start playing, it's going to be difficult, obviously. However, when you play more and more and more, you start to get better, right? You might get so good that you start recognizing when you're listening to a song what chords someone might be playing, what scales someone might be playing. You might even recognize different levels of musical effects that are being done. Like if it's an electric guitar, you can pick out the type of distortion that they're using or the amount of reverb. If you're playing sports, you might not be too good at the beginning, but you'll get so good if you keep practicing that eventually you can look at a front line and read what kind of offensive plays are going to be made or what kind of defense is being played against you. This is just like the same as analyzing literature. The more you read and the more you talk about literature, the better you get at recognizing these key elements and these key components. So a lot of this crops up as forms of symbolism, archetypes. More commonly, people know about like television tropes. Now, it's not just good to know that you should look, which is really good to know. You should definitely look. It's important to know where you should be looking. So to understand this, the first thing that we have to understand is that nothing is truly original. Everything is borrowed. Everything is altered, everything's inspired, and this is like completely and totally normal. What you want to be looking at are characters and how they behave, what names they have. Like we spoke about earlier, if you read a story and there's a character named Job, you should hopefully remember the biblical character, the biblical allusion that exists there. Everything that an author does is done for a reason, deliberately, if they're a good author. If they're a good writer, nothing's left up to chance. Every word, every punctuation mark, it exists for a reason. Not only do things exist for a reason, but things are omitted for reasons. There's a reason why James Joyce didn't really use a lot of quotation marks despite having character dialogue. So we look at elements of stories and we ask ourselves, have I seen this before? When you map out a story's plot, its sequence of events, have I seen an inciting incident at this level before? Have I seen someone fail a really big task? What happens next, usually? Do I see characters that don't want to go on adventures in the beginning? Do they usually end up going on the adventure? Yeah, absolutely. We want to look at how authors have made choices, what those choices are, and look at instances in which choices like those have been made. This is the study of literature. This is looking at the broad context. This is the study of not just one single book, but the dialogue that's been going on between authors and between readers since the first oral tradition began, since people started telling stories. The story of literature has evolved. We only have one life, one existence, and everything that's happened is a part of that story. Every experience we have is a part of that story, something that we might be able to relate to or experience or see somewhere else. That's what history is. It's the study of our story. There's only one. There's only one type of story, ours. Aristotle said there's two types of drama. There's tragedy and comedy. Other authors will say there's like only 7 different kinds of drama, plots. Some will say there's 21 kinds of plots. Kurt Vonnegut had a lot to say on the topic as well. Stephen King, in his book On Writing, he talks about the types of stories. Everyone has their own opinion. Mine, and I believe Foster, who is the author of this book that I'm kind of talking about now, there's only one real story, ours. Now, this is an idealistic view. Clearly, there's different types of plots, and you can create different categories, but the idea is that we all share this same story, and we all ride off or rather stand on the shoulders of the people that wrote before us and told stories before us. They influence us to tell our story. We relate to them, and so when it's time for us to create, that becomes the fountain from which we draw our inspiration. We've got lots of examples of this. We've got the story of Beowulf, which was conceived probably thousands of years ago, at least like 1,500 years ago. And then we have a contemporary rewriting of the story from the perspective of the monster Grendel. You would not have that book. You wouldn't have the book Grendel if you didn't have the poem Beowulf. The movie starring Antonio Banderas, The 13th Warrior, is an obvious, Beowulf story. And there's more. Anytime you have a foreign character coming from a faraway land to fight a monster, to save a kingdom, that's going to be like a Beowulf story. Any superhero can be said to be similar to Beowulf. Any hero that exemplifies the traits that a culture should strive to have, that's Beowulf. That's what Beowulf was. He was a character that the culture that told his story could look at and hold up as someone that everyone who hears this story should be like. You should be strong. You should be brave. You should be willing to fight for your people. That's Beowulf. The story is about a monster who, in the middle of the night, attacks when we're supposed to be safe. At home, in bed, asleep, that moment where we're completely defenseless, this monster comes at us. We don't even know it. We only wake up and see the bodies and the blood of the people he'd murdered. Beowulf is the story of a monster who reached from the dark to get us. It's the story of a hero. When that dark thing reached from the shadows after us, Beowulf, he reached back and he grabbed that arm and quite literally ripped it off. So, pretty cool story. Check it out. Lord of the Rings spawned orcs, as we know it. We got Dungeons and Dragons stories. We've got World of Warcraft, Warhammer, any story about orcs and trolls and all of that, that's Tolkien. And he got it from Norse mythology. He got it from Anglo-Saxon mythology. Anglo-Saxon. Beowulf. Why are there so many zombie movies, zombie games, vampire movies, vampire stuff? Like, this stuff comes in waves. All right? Find a zombie movie that doesn't involve a zombie getting shot in the head to kill it, like, that's rare. What zombie movies are like that? It's always like, go for the head. This is a trope that we've adopted and we've accepted. How zombies behave? There's a million different zombie movies, but they all behave the same way. Occasionally, when something deviates from that pattern, we recognize it. When you take, like, the Walking Dead zombies, and you compare them to 28 Day Later zombies, the Walking Dead zombies lumber around. The 28 Days Later, they charge at you. Running zombies. Freaky stuff. It's not just stories, it's poems. It's songs. All right? You talk about music, and you ask musicians, like, hey, where do you draw your inspiration from? They'll tell you. Bands that, we grow up playing an instrument, listening to music, right? Like, if we didn't love music, we probably wouldn't play an instrument, obviously. And when we grow up and start our own bands, the first songs we play are songs that we liked, songs that were familiar to us. And then maybe we do a little bit of improvisation. Maybe we learn to cover songs first, then we create. And the songs that we create might be similar to the songs that we used to listen to when we were young. We draw inspiration from things. It's a continuation of one big story. So, that being said, what do we do with that? We just want to recognize it. We just want to see it when it happens. We want to be able to recognize that this is a story similar to Hamlet. This is a story similar to Alice in Wonderland. This is an archetype. When I talk about people in this way, this is what I remember. This is what is going on. We want to take that and we want to think about it. Going back to what I said before, if there's a character in a book named Job, and this character doesn't live in like biblical times, he lives in like the year 3000, and it's future, and there's flying cars, and it's high technology, and everyone's basically in like a virtual reality matrix type situation. Despite the fact that it's so different, if I see a character named Job, I'm going to, immediately feel sorry for him, because I know he's probably going to suffer. And he's probably going to suffer at the hands of some entity that is far beyond his capability to fight against, but he will endure. That's the archetype. Now, knowing that, I just pay attention. I wait to see if I'm right. I pay attention to the story. And as I read, I cross off things from my list of what my expectations are. Does this story meet my expectations? Or does it do something different? If it does do something different, why did the author choose to do that? What's the author trying to say? What can I get from this? What does it make me think when there's a character named Job who's renowned for the suffering he had endured? What if this story about the futuristic Job? What if he kills himself? That totally goes against Job from the Bible. What might that be saying? It's a serious topic. And this is a serious conversation because it's our lives. We're all main characters in the most important story we'll ever experience. Our lives. Now, you're not going to catch everything. That's totally fine. There are plenty of allusions that go unnoticed by myself. Totally fine. A story can have a breadth of allusions and references, can have so much inspiration, but that doesn't mean it's going to be a good story. Just because a story's based off of Shakespeare doesn't mean it's going to be awesome. All right? Writing is something that you have to practice. It's something that you have to get good at. And a good story has good writing, regardless of whether it's based off of one thing, 1,000,000 things, or nothing at all. Basing a story off of Hamlet isn't going to save it. Ladies and gentlemen, Hamlet 2, which is in fact still better than Twilight. It got a much higher score than Twilight. Not the best score, but still better. So, if Stephanie Myers is watching this, she doesn't care. She's made more money than I'll ever see in my life, so whatever. Stephanie, I'm envious of her success. Forgive me. Anyway, so you say you haven't read anything, how are you going to catch it? Like I said, that's my job, to help you. To help you understand that as you get closer to understanding and recognizing these references, I will let you know. I will try to bring to you a context of this broader conversation. For many of you, I've been a part of this conversation for longer. And so I have a lot of references that I can share with you, insight that I can share with you. And when I'm gone, you'll take part in that conversation. When I'm dead and buried, you'll still be taking part in that conversation. Foster talks about this story with his father. He talks about mushrooms. He says that, his dad apparently liked looking at mushrooms. He was a big fan of mushrooms. Good for him, right? And he would take him out into the forest, and his dad would point out where the mushrooms were. He could never find them, his son. He'd say to his son, look, there's a yellow sponge, there's a black spike, and Thomas couldn't see them. But he knew he should look. He knew to start looking. And every time he went out, he'd start looking. And occasionally, he'd start to find them. The more he looked, the more he found. He knew to look. He knew where to look. And eventually, he started finding them everywhere. Now he can't not see them when he takes the most casual walks outside. So, I hope that you enjoyed and learned something from this. And I hope that the next time you're watching a television show, a movie, playing a video game, listening to music, or reading a book, you pay attention to where you are in this current story. Thanks a lot, guys. Please like and subscribe. Comment down below. What's your favorite story? Take it easy.